This is just a little samba built up on a single note. Other notes are bound to follow, but the root is still that note. Now this new one is a consequence of a one we've just been through, as I'm bound to be the unavoidable consequence of you. There's so many people who can talk and talk and talk and just say nothing or nearly nothing. I have used up all the skill I know, and at the end I've come to nothing or nearly nothing. So I come back to my first note, as I must come back to you. I will pour into that one note all the love I feel for you. Anyone who wants the whole show, re mi fa sol la ti do, he will find himself with no show. Better play the note you know.
Michael Walsh. Michael Walsh is an Eisner Award-winning artist, writer, and producer who has worked for Marvel, DC, Disney, Magic the Gathering, the Utah Jazz, and many others. He is best known as the creator, writer, and artist of the Eisner-nominated horror series The Silver Coin, and the writer and artist of the critical and commercial hit Universal Monsters Frankenstein. With over 10 years of professional comic book credits, he has worked on pop icons ranging from Spider-Man to Star Wars. His creator-owned comeback was optioned for a feature film by Skybound Entertainment. Take it away, Michael.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining in for some portfolio reviews today. I'll try and cover a lot of the bases in terms of coloring, inking, storytelling, lettering, like whatever I spot that is working or isn't working, I'll point out. And I'm not going to be too harsh on anyone, but I'm just trying to be constructive so that I can say things that are universal that everyone can kind of take home with them and learn and do better at the craft. Because everyone has stuff to learn and stuff that they can get better at. I've been doing this almost 15 years now, and every day I'm still learning something new. So making comics, telling stories, it's a work in progress, and we're always trying to get better. So, having some notes doesn't mean that you're not on the right path. It just means that you've got stuff to work on. So I'm gonna hop off on the first portfolio here with Eliana. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name correctly, but Eliana, are you in the chat right now? I'm not sure if you're going to be in the recording your voice live, so I can just start it off now. So this here, I'm sharing my screen so that people can follow along with what I'm looking at here. And this is the portfolio, the first portfolio I'm going to be working with. You can see here the verse story is in black and white. So first of all, the first note that I would have is that when you're starting off as a comic book artist, one of the things that you really want to focus on is clarity of storytelling. And what Eliana is doing here with the page layout is that they're breaking up the panels in these kind of organic shapes, and they're doing like a flat black gutter in between the panels. And then the panels are not going straight across, they're kind of dipping. The storytelling is pretty clear here to my eye, but one of the things that you really want to think about, at least when you're first starting and you're developing the craft and getting better at drawing and creating comic books, is that you want to be really, really clear with your storytelling, and you want to make sure that your panel to panel pacing is really strong. So I always say to people off at the beginning of their career, instead of focusing on doing these really creative layouts, and trying to do like impressionistic or abstract storytelling, one of the things that you want to focus on at the beginning is just doing like straight up panel grids. And then as you get that down and everything is super crystal clear, then that's, I think, when you can start trying to get more creative with the way that the pages are laid out. For example, this page here, like Eliana is doing a smaller panel and then a longer panel and then breaking over to this side and this to this side and these crosses. And it's still pretty clear, but I think that the pages would benefit from just a little bit more structure in terms of the paneling, just so that everything is there on the page. I think what editors want to see when they're looking at a portfolio from a newer person in the industry is that they don't want to be kind of taken out of the art by the storytelling. They want just everything to flow really well. They don't want to have to think of where their eyes should go into the next panel. So that's just something to think about in the future here. I think I don't think anything's like really, really out of line with the storytelling, but it's just something to think about. So we'll start off now going page by page here. Um, I like the gray washes. I think that they're adding a lot of mood, but I think that you're maybe getting a little bit dark in some of the tones here, the tonal areas, and I think that it's making a little bit of the structure of the face kind of muddy here. So you've got a light source coming from the top right, and the light's hitting the this character's left, what we're seeing as like the top of the face here. And it's working well in this panel, but as soon as they move their head up, it looks like the light source kind of shifts. And now it's kind of coming from straight from that side instead of overhead. So there's a little bit of movement in where the light source is. This is something you want to kind of watch. You want to watch your lighting for consistency from panel to panel so that you're making sure that the light is always coming from the same spot when you're telling the story. And if you keep that grounded and you keep that continuity of light, then your character will feel more real and your story will feel more lived in and more like you're there experiencing it. Like you can suspend your disbelief only so much when you're looking at a story and looking at a comic book. So you want to make sure that the suspension of disbelief doesn't go beyond the the point that you're taking a reader out of the story and making them think about that fact that they're reading a comic, that what they're reading isn't real. You want them to be so immersed that panel to panel they're just ripping through until they get to the end of the story and then it's done. You don't want them to be like, oh, something feels off and they can't put their finger on why. Sometimes readers will be like, oh, there's something off about this art and I can't place it. And a lot of times that'll be because there is not a continuity of light. There is storytelling that's not clear. And whether they can put their finger on it or not, it's still there and it's still prevalent. And it's still taking them out of the story, which is kind of this cardinal sin of storytelling, is that you don't want to take a reader out of the experience of reading that story. So I think that's one thing on this page that I'm seeing here is a bit of a lack of continuity of light source. But there is some really nice moody atmosphere. I was saying, you don't want the darks to get too muddy, but I think that there's a lot of intention on this panel in the way that this figure is really pushed into the background by the darkness of the gray on them. One thing you want to watch is if you're considering a story for print, you kind of want to be careful with how dark you're going, and you want to almost test some things because once you hit a certain value of gray, some printers will print that so close to the black that you'll just lose everything. So you just want to be really conscious of how dark you're going with the gray and maybe check out where you're getting this printed and do a test on the levels and then adapt your gray tones or your gray washes to how they look in print. If this is going to be a digital only story, then you might want to look at it on a few different screens, look at it on your phone, on your Cintiq or your tablet or whatever you're working on your iPad, and then look on a monitor as well, and just make sure that all your levels are very precise so that you're not losing any of the details that you've worked on, depending on what screen somebody's looking at it on. But the storytelling is nice here. What I like on this page is that you're starting with a tighter shot and then you're pulling out and then you are establishing the scene and then you're pushing back in for the reaction. You're kind of doing like a jump scare almost, and I think it's pretty effective here to show what you want to do when you're doing a jump scare in a horror comic is you want to show a reaction first, which will build tension in the reader because then they're relating to this character's reaction of holy crap, what's that? Or there's something in the dark over there, and you get this build of emotion. You might have wanted to save the jump almost for a page turn or a page scroll. If this is something digital, you kind of want to scroll into the page turn. So, yeah, you could have saved the reveal for the full figure here. You could have shown this reaction on the face, and then maybe just a slight outline, like there's something in the dark. And then when this figure goes to turn on the light, then you could kind of do this. Um, but I do really like how you've paced this out because you do have kind of the jump scare coming after the page turn. I think the thing that could have be refined a little bit is that you've got the same panel twice here. And I think if you did something just a little bit more um, ethereal in this panel, and then you saved that for this page turn, I think you could have had a little bit more of a scare. But I really like the light turning on and the way you've changed the gray wash here into a more brighter thing. And then you've got the click. I think this is really working. This is super creepy. I love it. A plus on this three panel sequence here. It's very subtle, but I think it is very unsettling. Um, then you've got your figures here. Um, I think I think this is a page that maybe suffers a little from this shape of this panel. Like I said, I think you want to really focus on just working in a gridded structure at first. I think working in a gridded structure and then focusing more on the basics of anatomy, lighting, um, setting perspective, like put your focus onto those things because those things are really important when you're learning. And for this the style of the panel layouts, like keep it simple, and then as the basics come and you got your perspective down, you've got your figure, you've got your anatomy down, that's when you can get a little bit more creative with the page layouts. One thing that's happening here is that um, because this panel has this huge black spot here, I feel like the page is losing a little bit of the balance in the negative space because there's kind of just like a chunk of the negative spaces here in this black, and my eye just keeps getting drawn towards it because what happens when you're creating a comic is that your eyes will lead towards negative space quite often. And because there's this big block of black here, I just keep my eyes just keep moving towards it. And you want to be very conscious and intentional about where you're leading the eye on any given page. Um, I like the way that you're spotting blacks in your inking here. I think you're doing some nice shadows here. I like that this figure is almost silhouetted because of the light here, and the lighting on this panel is strong. Little bit of figure work that can be improved on here, but um, I think I think you're at a point now with your art that Ileana, that the figure art and the structure of figures and anatomy will come over time, and that's just going to come with drawing more. I recommend doing life drawing to everybody, whether you're a newer older artist or an older artist. I still love to go to life drawing. I just don't have the time for it lately, but if I go to life drawing once a week for a few months, I find that I'm a better artist. And like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years. I draw 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, so um, it benefits everyone to go to figure drawing. It is a muscle that drawing is a muscle that you need to work or it petrifies. So I recommend, doing some figure drawing, going to some life drawing, keeping on practicing drawing anatomy, use reference where you need it. Um, One thing I would say in this page, there's a little bit of a perspective issue on this panel. So I'll show you how this could be improved a little bit. I'm going to bring this into Photoshop and do a quick little sketch here. So we've got a 2-point perspective. We've got one of our perspective, our horizon line is kind of like above here, it looks like. So we've got one vanishing point that's way off to the side here. And then we've got one vanishing point. So one vanishing point that's like kind of up here a little bit. So I think what's happening here is that your vanishing points don't have the same horizon line. And there's a little bit of wonkiness kind of going on in the shapes here and in the length of the beds. So if I were going to be drawing this page, one thing that you can always start off with is having your horizon line at the eye level of the character that you're kind of getting behind. So say you've got this character here, they're standing in front of the light. Like I said, this is a great silhouette. This is a great pose. I think it's working. Um, I think what you might want to do for this page would be to have your horizon line at the eye level of that character. And then a good like easy tip for having 2-point perspective is that you want one of the points, the vanishing points, to be close to the edge of the page, like just slightly, a few inches off the edge. And then the other vanishing point would be way to the side here. So say we've got one way out here. Oops. We got one here. And then we've got another one way, way out over here. So now you can see that the bed shapes here, you kind of want to fix these up a little bit. So this table would probably be about here, like this. The lamp. I like the overlap. So one of the things that you're doing really well in this panel is you've got a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, and they overlap each other. So what that does is create the illusion of depth. When you have figures overlapping other objects and you have the different planes have different lighting, that really, really drives home that there's depth. So having your foreground character completely silhouetted and then having the middle ground in a mid-tone and then the background in a light tone, that creates a really, really nice illusion of depth. But yeah, going back to the perspective here. Where was my red? Okay, here's the red. So this bed would be right beside this night table, right? So we're just gonna have to put it right there. It would go to the back of the night table, and then there would be the headboard here. Same here. Now the headboards would be the same height, so that headboard would be there, be close to the side of the table, but we're just gonna fudge the placement of things here because we want to make sure that we're seeing this figure in full. This bed would be like there, like that. You probably, because of you're doing a bit of forced perspective there, so you probably want the panel border to be, like I said, it's a good idea early on to just keep those things structured. And then this figure would be pushed up in the bed, kind of up on their headboard a little bit more. So you've got them up here on this bed, like that. So this is now an accurate representation of 2-point perspective. You've got both of the characters on the same eye level now, which creates a tension in their relationship as well. And it's more accurate to how this would really look in a real life scenario. So, you can move around where you want the perspective to be, but it's very important that you are drawing your figures in perspective correctly, because like I said before, a lot of readers will not understand why a panel looks off, but they will know that it's off, and that will pull them out of the story. And as soon as the reader's out of the story, then you've already lost something in the quality of your comic book. So for me, I always recommend this book to people that are still working on their perspective. It's a book called Perspective Made Easy, written by and drawn by Ernest R. Norling. You can get it for really cheap. It's a $10 book, and it is very clear and concise in its directions for how to draw figures in perspective and to keep it accurate and readable. And there's diagrams like this that just make it super easy to accomplish. I recommend everybody read this book, even people that have been doing this for a while. You read this book front to back, and you will have such a greater understanding of perspective and how to draw figures in perspective. being able to understand perspective and being able to draw figures in perspective are all two different skill sets. Like I think there's a lot of people that can draw a cityscape, a bunch of buildings, blocky, and put them in perspective and have that be accurate. But as soon as they drop a human or an organic shape or object into that perspective, things start to look off. So understanding how to draw a figure in perspective is one of the most important things in comic books, because the way that characters interact with their setting is something that is used to ground a comic and make it feel real. So that's just something I would recommend reading front to back and working on. But again, like I said, there's a lot that you're doing really well on this page. The way that you're building tension here is so good. I think that you're doing some really nice stuff with the gray wash and the lighting, this shadow behind this figure. Although it's not exactly where it would be, it's really creating a great mood. And I think that sometimes if it's not exactly accurate but the intention is correct, and like this shadow wouldn't be here, it would kind of be over here on the wall, but you're putting it here just to create that extra tension, and it's working. And as long as you know the rules and you understand why you're breaking them, I think that's really important. So it's all about art. A lot of times is about understanding and then intent. But I do like I said, also the illusion of depth that you're creating here. Again, here you're doing perspectives a little off here. The bed would be much bigger, but I'm not going to do the whole redraw of this again. But you can see here, like I said, the headboard would be much higher. The pillow would be much bigger. This figure would probably be a little bit smaller. But what I will actually copy this panel because I want to show you another trick with drawing multiple figures in perspective to make it as accurate as possible really quickly. So we're going to drop this panel in. Let's grab our perspective lines that we already have here. Let's make them red. Okay, so you've got this perspective in one point right there. So that's at about the eye level of this character that's sitting up. One thing that's useful too is, like, even though you're not going to be drawing what's down here, understanding where the rest of the figure goes here helps you with drawing the other figure. So say they've got their arms crossed here. They've got their feet on the bed. We've got their headboard would be here. They're probably leaning on their pillow. Here's the edge of their bed. This would be the back of their bed. So follow that line, right? They've got their beds on the same plane. This is where you've got your perspective. That would be the back of this character's bed. Here's the headboard. Let's put it here. That would be there on that bed. We've got the table here. Now, this is the back of, yeah, I think we want that. Okay. Kind of more where his butt is, actually, now that I'm looking at this. So here, he'd have his butt almost against the back of the bed, right? And that's the pillow. Headboard's here. He's kind of right leaning forward from it. So this headboard would be here. The butt, the bottom of this headboard would be here. Where does that connect with that? Right there at the table. We're just doing roughing in the beds here quickly. So one thing that's a good useful thing is that if these people are the same height, his head top, this person's head top is there. There's the jaw. You can put his head into perspective, right? So you know that his head, if this character is sitting on this bed in the middle, his head's there, his shoulders there, his feet are there. So he's that big. That's how big he is. And then you can kind of move that around a little bit, right? So if we're drawing him, moving him forward a little bit, we've got him there. he'd just be much smaller. And then he'd have his feet there, and this would be coming out like you have it. But I think it's just like you just kind of want to put everything into perspective. Use these the lines into the vanishing point to show how big the other shape would be. You can use the head height of your character in the foreground as a guideline for where the how large the head on the next character would be, and just using you don't even have to draw that many things into perspective, but if you know where your vanishing point is, then you can use that as a guideline to make sure that you're drawing all the figures on the page at the right size and in the right space. And that's a really good way to make sure that you're uh, not taking anybody out of the reading experience and it's making it feel accurate to the way that this would look in real life. Okay, so let's go back here. This looks great. This kind of top-down angle, that's a tough angle to draw. I still have problems with it, but you're doing a really nice job. I like the drawing on this figure a lot, actually. Um, there's a lot of movement in it, and it's not stiff, but it doesn't feel like it's poorly drawn. It's a really, really nice drawing of the figure. Again, I think this is a case where this page would just work a little bit better if the panel shapes were a little bit more structured. I'm not saying like you can't have messy panels here, but think a bit again about, the size of the gutter and the negative space, um, and the way that you're leading the eye. So you're leading left to right here really well. Um, you might have wanted to have, instead of this figure looking off of the page, looking that way, and then maybe looking like I know they're looking at the character to their left, but you got to think about the way that you're leading the eye. So a lot of times when you're reading a comic, you're looking at where the eyes of the character you're focusing on are taking you, and they're kind of leading you like this, right, left, right, and then he's actually leading you down here, the way he's looking down at this figure. So what's happening is when you read this, you can't help but glance down and see this reveal panel before you look at this because of where that eye is leading you. So there might be a better way to, I like what you're doing with the three similar panels and you're showing the character kind of thinking and you're building tension again, but think about where you're leading the eye a little bit more. You might have even just wanted to do two panels here. And that way you could have done this panel and then this panel. And then maybe on this, you've just got a tight shot of this character's eyes, like open, like, oh, scared. And you don't have to show them looking that way because it leads you right off the page and you've already been led down this way from this panel. This is a great panel. I love that you've cast the eyes in shadow here. That's a great panel. And you're actually leading the eye down here well here because of the slant of this. Like I said before, it's nice to have structured panel layouts, but this is a case where what you're doing is working because you're using the shape of the panel to lead the eye. This is a really nice panel. You've got this like kind of low angle that you're looking up behind and over behind the character, and you're putting yourself in their shoes and you're seeing what they're seeing. It's really nice. This is a nice drawing, really creepy. I think this what you did here by having that character in the foreground and full silhouette, you could be doing here to create a little bit more depth. Um, the size discrepancy, again, the beds are tiny. Just make sure that you're drawing like these beds are really, really small. So think again about the environment, and you have to put as much love into making sure the environment is accurate as you're putting into the characters and the storytelling and all those decisions. Um, you might have wanted to have this character a little bit higher. Um, you're cutting off a hand here. I don't know if that was there's a lot of reasons this could happen. You could have just drawn this panel like this. You could be hiding this hand so that you don't have to draw it to save yourself time. You could be you could have just really wanted to do more mid shots because mid shots are easy, frankly. When you're drawing a page, mid shots are kind of the easiest and the least time consuming thing that you can do with the shot. So you've got this character in a mid, but I think having their hand is a good opportunity to show some of their emotions since we can't see their face. The hands, it's cheesy as hell. You know, people say like the hands are the gateway to the soul, the eyes are the gateway to the soul. But if you're not showing a character's face, their hands are a good way to show their emotion. So, like what you could have done with this panel. I'll show you here. Uh, okay, so you could have had this figure higher up. Again, I think this panel would have benefited by having been more structured. Have this figure more silhouetted, and then show their hand like this, you know, have the fingers kind of more crunched up, or even have them pushed forward in more of a defensive way, like he's putting his hand out to block this character from getting close to him. And that would create more tension, a feeling that this character is really frightened, even though we're not seeing the front of their face. That hand is doing a lot emotionally for what the character is going to be doing. These are obviously very crude drawings, guys, but I'm just trying to do this quickly because we've got some more portfolios to get through, right? So what we're doing now is if we're putting the perspective lower at this character's shoulder level, that means here's the horizon line. We want to look almost like in his eye line at what he's looking at, right? So actually, let's move this perspective or the horizon line there. This is what he's looking at. Here's his head. This character would probably be a lot closer. So they would be more like right there, which means the bed, you know, if you're having trouble figuring out how large something like a bed would be, go stand beside your bed. See where it goes up to you. A bed usually goes up to about your elbow, I would guess for me. I'm about 5'8". But like, you know, go check out a bed and figure out how tall that goes. So if the beds are going up to this character's elbow and they are standing beside the bed, the pillow's there, that's there. Here's the perspective line. Vanishing point goes there. Because the vanishing point is so tight to the bed, that means there's a lot of foreshortening, which means that the bed would be really short like that. It'd be like that because the vanishing point is so close to the bed. So it's like there. There's the nightstand. There's the other bed. Make sure it's in line. There you go. So that would be a way to add a little bit of tension, a little bit of motion, is get that character's hand in it. Again, make sure that the figures are as big as they should be in where they're standing in relation to each other, and just really hammer home. I'm just going to keep hammering home drawing perspective and figures in perspective accurately, because it will just add a lot to a lot of professionalism and make this really come together. So we're gonna go through here. I think the storytelling here, you might have wanted, like, there's a little bit of muddiness in where the eye should be going in this panel here from this. That's a great drawing of a hand. Just by the way, hands are tough to draw, but that's a nice drawing of a hand. That's a nice hand there. So on a panel like this, that's really static. I draw a lot of panels like this. I actually just like, you know, it's not, there's a bit of a confliction of ideas in terms of storytelling and the way that you should be telling things. Some people think you should always be having 2-point perspective. Some people like 1-point perspective and like to use it in almost a graphic way and be very intentional with their storytelling. I use a lot of 1-point perspective, and I do like two characters in profile. I think you can get a lot of emotion there. But one way to zhuzh up a 1-point perspective with two characters in profile was something I mentioned before that you did really well previously in the panel like this, where you've got the foreground, medium background, foreground, medium background. What you can do in a panel like this is have something in the foreground, in the severe foreground, that's an object. So you could have maybe one of the beds, the end of the beds in front of this character that's pushed really far into the foreground. And that addition of depth to something that's very static and flat in terms of this page, that can just add a little bit to it and make it feel like there's a little bit more going on in the setting of that scene. One thing I'd say, you want to be really intentional with where figures are cut off on panel edges. So this figure is like kind of almost in the middle of the panel, and this figure is completely cut off by the panel edge. You might want to just center this out a little bit more so you can, again, get this arm in, maybe just have it come back over the body with the fingers crunched up. Show that this figure, or like this character's emotion through their hand and their face, and through their body language. You've got good body language in both of these. I think that's something that you're doing really well actually here is the body language. Like your characters are emoting a lot in the way that they're standing, the way that they're hunching. It's not just all talking heads. You're doing a lot with their body language, which is really important in horror. Um, this is a nice panel. I think you're doing a good job here with what I was talking about with figures in perspective, with lining things up at the right height. These doors are the right height. They could be a little bit taller, but generally speaking, this is looking good. This is a nice change up from where you've had the camera placed in the other panels. Contrasting and making sure that there's a lot of variance in where you're moving your camera is a good way to add add to the storytelling. Uh, okay, this is really nice. I like how you're tightening up the focus here. The SFX looks good too. I think you chose a nice font for the SFX here, and I like the choice of going flat black. I think there's a nice graphic quality to that. And I think the way that you're kind of like tightening in on the door and on these two little white spots here is a really nice way to uh, focus the reader in on what the character is focusing on and put them in the mind of the character. This is a really nice panel. I can tell like you have probably looked at a bathroom and figured out how this would work uh, in terms of perspective from this angle. I think you're doing this is a really nice drawing. This is actually, to me, probably one of the most effective drawings in this whole story so far. Um, You've got a really low angle shot. You've got like a really nice foreground, medium background. The hand drawing of the hand is really nice. And you've got your figures, expression, and body language is really strong. And you're not really overdoing it with the grays. You've got your kind of like when you're doing gray wash, you almost want to make sure that what you're doing is intentionally separating planes with different values of gray. So you've got like a flat value of gray here, and you've got a flat value of gray here. You've got your flat white, and then you've got your pitch black in the very, very far foreground, and your light source is very accurate. So I think this is actually a really successful panel. The only thing that you've done wrong on this panel, actually, no, you haven't. Because if this is a clear garbage bin, then that could be the other side. But I think what you might have wanted to do, because um, you're low your camera is low, um, this garbage bin, you wouldn't be seeing like it wouldn't be open. You'd be seeing the curve of the lip of the garbage that's closest to the camera because what happens if your eye level's like down here, um, here's your like eye or whatever, and your horizon line's low. That means like you have here in this the tile, that means everything is kind of going up like this into a vanishing point that's way, way, way up in the sky, which means you're looking up, and if you're looking up at a rounded object, it would be rounded like you have it here. Um, the only thing I think is because you're showing this line, if it's a clear garbage, like it's not clear enough that this isn't the top opening, because for a second I thought that this you were seeing like the opening of the top. But if this is a clear garbage can, then you're seeing that would be the other side of the lip. So I think just for clarity, for the sake of clarity, you could just wash that out in gray and then you're getting the full garbage. And maybe even you could do this and just make it like a bin just to add more life, put some stuff in it. that adds like texture to the environment, you know? And what's really important in something like this, in all of comics and all of storytelling, is that you think of the environment as a character, right? So you want to put as much time into dressing the environment as you do into costuming your characters. Oh, I just lost your portfolio. So let's open that again. And so yeah, I think, maybe just adding a little bit of detritus in the garbage here would have been a good way to add a little bit of a lived-in quality to the room. Oh, that's a nice, very nice page there. Um, I think this is really successful. Again, you're doing a really good job with these high angle shots looking down on the characters. This perspective looks pretty accurate here. And I like that you're overlaying this. So this is a page where I think that your experimentation in storytelling is really working. I think having these two overlapping panels, um, and then having your figure here, it kind of like he's looking down, and because his eyes are leading to himself, you're kind of reading really well. You're reading left to right, down, and then through the page, and then you're seeing this come up through the door. This is really nice. I think this is a fantastic page, and it's a really great page to end the story on. You kind of want to end on a banger, and this is your banger from this book or from this short story. So really, really, really great page here. I think you should be proud of it. I think it's really nice work. One other thing that I'd mention on this story, I think that your lettering could use a little bit of work. I know that, when you become a professional comics artist, you very rarely, if ever, would be lettering your own work. But I think that the lettering in this takes a little bit away from the art. And I think you could have used a font. I think one thing to think about, and I've only lettered a little bit, and um, if anybody has the opportunity, they should tune into Becca Carey when she talks about lettering in her panel. But one thing to think about is that the lettering, the font that you use, the weight of it should be like really in unison with the weight of the way that you draw your lines in your artwork. You want there to be something there that is working together. And the same can be said about the line weights on the borders of your bubbles. Um, you want the line weights to be a good closeness to the line weights on the inking, so that it looks like it's, they're two parts of a whole, that it is all working together in unison, and the lettering is collaborating with the artwork. And you've got, like, because you've got these like kind of jagged panel borders, the cleanliness of the lettering border is uh is like kind of discontinuous with the quality of the line of the borders of the panel. So that's something to think about too. One other thing is you've got your speaker in this panel on the right. The first speaker is on the right, and then the second speaker is on the left. So what's happening is here is your balloon tails are crossing paths, and like it's like Ghostbusters. You don't want to cross streams if you can avoid it at all. And because you are the person who is writing and drawing this story, I think that you have the opportunity to just not have to do this. So you could have either flipped the view, moved the figures around in a different way so that the panels, so you're not crossing the streams here. But that's something to think about. One resource that I always mention when you're just getting into doing lettering is to go check out Blambot. Nate is like an incredible letterer, one of the best in the business. He has a ton of fonts here. He's got a lot of free fonts and starter fonts, but then he's got some incredible fonts that are really easy. They've got really clear examples of what they look like on the page. So that's a good place, a resource to go grab a font that works well with your artwork. I think this font is maybe just a little blocky for where you're at, but in terms of the line, but it's not. I've seen much worse. I think also one thing that you need to do is that the spacing from line to line, the line spacing, could be a little bit tighter. I think there's a little too much space between like what do and then the next line you think you're doing. Like I think that can be cut down. I don't know. My rule of thumb is like if you're using like a 7 font, do like the spacing 8, only one above, and just be conscious of it. Don't do what take a look at it, all of it while you're working, and make sure that you're not just going with the auto spacing. You kind of want to take a look and make sure that it's working in the bubbles. Um, and yeah, I can see people in the chat are posting some other nice fonts. So yeah, definitely something to look at and think about. But you know, it's a great story, great start, a lot of tension. It's scary in all the right ways. I think you're doing a lot of things really well in this story. And once you can kind of nail those basics, um, especially with the perspective stuff and just kind of clarity of storytelling and being very intentional about where you lead the eye, I think it'll really elevate this story to another level. And now I've already talked about your first one for almost an hour. So I'm going to go really quickly through the second one, just point out anything I see, and then I've got 2 more portfolios to do. So I'm going to have to move on soon. Um, this one tonally is very different from the first story, but I'm guessing because I'm a horror guy, you brought the horror story to me for a reason. Um, I like your character here. I think it's like the way that you're doing the eyes is really expressive. This is a really nice figure drawing here. This is a nice pose, nice low angle shot. Um, it's interesting how you're doing this big full bleed panel that then like works in the gutters of the rest of the page. I think your work is working, your art's looking a little better in black and white. I think your coloring, um, I don't know. I think there's a little bit of muddiness to it, to like the browns and the reds and the gradient here. I think with the way that you draw, maybe a little bit more of a flat style could work a little bit better, or something flat with a little bit of texture to it. The kind of like the way you've got this texture on the grass, maybe try and carry that across, you know, the whole page, adding texture to other elements of the page as well. This is a nice panel of the forest leading down. This is kind of a cool storytelling thing, this circle that you've drawn down here. I would have the same notes on the lettering in this. I think the bubble line might be a little bit too big. And on this one, I actually am wondering if the font is a little too thin if you're looking at it compared to the lines. Like it's a little bit more blocky in this story, if you can see here compared to here. Um, This is a really nice panel. I think you're doing a really good job, again, with your characters acting, with their expressions, with their movement and their body language. This is creepy and cool. I like this. I'm a big body horror guy, so warty mushroom dog creature is appealing to me. Um, this is nice. I don't know if the gradients are working. So one thing to think about when you're coloring, and I'll just show you this really quickly because I do color a lot of my own work now. You want to look at the values. So what I mean by that is if I've got a page in full color, a good thing to do is to look at the page in black and white, because what that does is let you see really clearly the contrast and values of your colors. So things up here are like pretty muddy and pretty dark. Um, so you're kind of losing some of this nice inking and detail that you've got in these trees here. I think there's actually some really nice stuff going on here. This figure looks great. It's really creepy and cool. I kind of like the idea that you're doing in this story where you're playing with, like, at first it seems like this bright, almost like all ages art, and as the story goes, it gets much darker. Um, so I think, yeah, you could just play up the contrast and values a little bit more. but that's just a tip for all of your pages really is to keep an eye on the values. Um, in this page here, you might have wanted to just have this gutter be just pure black. I think the purple is like is like muddying things up a little bit compared to the values of everything else. But the values are not bad here. If you look at this, like you've got a nice brightness to the dog that's making it stand out from the background really well. And she's just enough of like a mid to push her away from the darks of the back. So the values are pretty strong. And that's just something like every time I'm coloring a page, I will make it black and white. As I'm coloring it in because I want to make sure that all the values are separating the different planes. Um, and again, this face is great. I think that's a really nice drawing. And this last page, again, you're good with your last pages. I think one of the things that you're doing really well here is pacing. In both stories, you're kind of creating tension, releasing tension, creating tension, releasing tension, building it up towards the climax of the story, and then ending on in both pieces, I think the strongest page, which is a really smart thing to do. And it's very strong, intuitive storytelling. So really great job on that. So yeah, really great stuff, Eliana. I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly, but I think you're a great artist. I think you've got cool ideas and you're doing a really good job at the things that I mentioned. And then you need to work on some of the other things that I mentioned, figures in perspective, little bit of intent and storytelling. Keep checking on those values. I think you can simplify your coloring a bit by just maybe try flat colors and adding just texture to everything. I think might work really well. Cutting out some of these really digital looking gradients in the colors. Um, but overall, great work. With a few improvements, I think you're gonna be on the up and up. So thank you, Eliana, for submitting your portfolio. I really appreciate you, and I know that everybody else who's listening and learning from this review also really appreciates you. And it takes a lot of courage to put your artwork out there and put it in front of the eyes of a lot of other people. That is a really hard thing to do. So I commend you for your courage for putting yourself out there, especially when you're starting out and learning, because you're just going to keep getting better from this point. And I hope that the things that I've told you are constructive. So I'm going to move on to the next person in our review. And that, yeah, Eliana just mentioned in the chat that they are working on their um, senior thesis this semester. So, and they're gonna update when it's done. So yeah, feel free to reach back out to me, Eliana. I'm happy to like take a look again once you've made some updates and like kind of go through things again. And then we can find we can help improve on everything that you've done and everything that you're going to be doing. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next review. So this is the work of John Conrad. Right off the hop, this is a beautiful cover. Um, One of the things I usually do, I don't know, is John in the chat? I just want to make sure that John Conrad is here before I start going through their portfolio.
I don't see someone named John Conrad in the call, but they might be on YouTube.
Okay, okay. Well, but this is going to be recorded for later viewing as well, right?
Yep, that's
Okay.
correct.
Well, that's good. I'll just jump into John's, and then if they're not here, they'll have to watch it later. But I'll do my best to get through it. But I was going to say that one of the things that I usually do when I'm doing portfolio reviews, especially in comics, is a good thing to know is a person's influences, because then you can see if the things that they're doing are by choice, the style choices that they're making are inspired by other people, or things that they're just kind of doing naturally. But because I'm just doing these reviews, and I'm not having a back and forth with the artists, I don't have the opportunity to ask them that. But if there's anybody in the chat that is actually reviewing other people's portfolios in the future, one of the first things that you should do is ask what someone's inspirations are, and that will help help you get an understanding of them as an artist and as a person, so you can look at their work from a different perspective. But first of all, really like the cover. I really like your characters. I think your inking is great. I love how you're dropping the holding line on this figure and letting the big blocky brushy inks for the folds really dictate the shape of the fabric and this coat. And then the color is doing the separation on the edge. It's really fun choices. And I like there's a nice contrast in weight in line here, where you're getting thinner strokes for the hair, and then you're getting more thicker, blocky strokes for the coat. And that's an intentional choice, because if this is digital, you've got to change the weight of the line of the digital brush that you're using. If this is traditional, then you're using two different tools. That's an intentional choice, and it was a smart choice. I think what you're doing there is creating a lot of visual interest by having contrasting line weights, contrasting inking styles. So there's a lot of really nice stuff going on here. You've also got in the background this nice dry brush, this texture, that's just really, really beautiful. And as someone who loves inking, traditional inking, I mean, you can do textures like this digitally. You just find old dry brush textures or dry brushes for whatever inking program you're using. So like I said, I can't tell whether this is digital or traditional, and that's a great thing. Any work where I'm like, I don't know if this is digital or traditional, that means that this artist has a really great understanding of the tools that they are using. Now, again, I like this figure. I like the brush here. The one thing I think that could be changed on this is the font used for Hold My Hair, I Think I'm Gonna Puke by John Conrad, which is a great name. Love it. I grew up a punk kid going to shows. I've had people hold my hair back when I had hair a lot of times, so it's very relatable title. I think it's a great name. I think that this Adventures Close to Home is really nice. The way that this is drawn, whether that's a font or hand drawn, it looks really good. I think that the title and the name, that could have had a little bit more thought put into the font that was used for that to just really bring it home. And I think it's literally the only thing that is pulling this cover down, and it's only in the slightest. I like this face, the way that this is colored flat. You're not getting the drop shadow, and then a little bit of rosiness on the cheek. I think that this face would actually work better with the subtlety of the coloring on that face. So those would be my two small notes on this cover, but overall, fantastic. I love it. I'm already pulled in to the characters and curious about the story. Okay, so we've got some really nice inking going on here. I kind of like that John is not using gray wash here, because that forces you to define as much as you can in just flat black ink, and it really shows off your inks. If you don't use gray wash, like, your inks are highlighted so much, you see them so clearly, you see all of the lines are defined so well, and John is doing a really great job here again with using different line weights to define different kinds of textures within the scene, and create a lot of visual interest. So like I said here, you're seeing like a very thin brush for the leggings on this character, and then you're seeing a lot thicker weights on other things, and John is like got this hair because it's a lighter hair. John is using a thinner brush, thinner line weight to create the hair, and then on this it's just a flat black shape, and that kind of graphic quality to inking is very appealing to me. It suits my tastes, as somebody who's a big fan of the medium, so I like to see a little bit of experimentation there with a little bit of drawing, but then also these big black shapes. The shadow against the wall here, it's pretty off, especially because the corner of the wall is here. So the shadow would actually kind of go up on that side and then on that side as well. So your shadows on walls, you're drawing those in the same perspective that the wall is in. So you've got this wall kind of coming down here to eye level. So this shadow would be kind of twisted. But the problem here is that you've got the shadow for the mic coming up there. So the shadow that means the light's here coming up. I mean, I just think there's a little bit of inconsistency in the way that the shadows are drawn on the wall and the lighting here. It's a very small detail. I will say one thing that, if you're having trouble with that, instead of just like putting it in wrong, you didn't need to really do it. You could have just like you could have fudged it if you're having trouble getting it right. So let's grab this, bring this over here. Oops. Got your light sources somewhere here, right? Because you've got the shadow from the mic in the last panel was like there. Um, and then you've got your figure. So if you've got your shadow of the mic there, this person, it would technically be standing behind the mic, right? So if the shadow of the mic is there and they're behind it, then technically their shadow should be right there. So I think, first of all, I think the mic shadow is drawn incorrectly. I get why you're doing it. It's great in the first two panels. I think it does add some atmosphere to those panels. But the problem is that like when you look closely at it, you're seeing that it's all pretty off. So, if the shadow is from the mic is coming here in those first panels, and then this character's feet are there, and then that coming up there, and then in the perspective, it would kind of be more over there. Oh, my Cintiq pen just fell apart. My little kid was throwing it around this morning, so I've got to fix that now. But yeah, I think that's just something to be conscious of instead of um, really fussing with trying to get that shadow right. You might have wanted to just either use a reference shot to try and figure out how to draw it as accurate as possible, or just kind of black out that back wall. Sorry, I'm going to show you an example as soon as I can fix a piece of my pen popped out. Sorry, technical difficulties, everybody. There we go. Okay. Um, so you've got your light source as a spotlight, probably kind of from when you're on stage, there's spotlights here. I've played a lot of concerts in my day. So a lot of times you've got spotlights down low or from over top, kind of like this, crossing down on characters. If this is just like a small shitty venue, there might just be room lighting or just like a couple at the bottom, which would create like a light kind of going up from a down light. So it would be kind of like that. So you could have always just done that. If you're trying to quickly block out shapes and lighting, doing something like that is a quick solve if you're trying to figure something out, right? Like sometimes in an effort for expediency and deadline time, like sometimes you need to just block things out, especially when you have a style like this and you're already making some really graphic choices. I think blocking things out instead of drawing them wrong is a smarter choice. Um, but yeah, going back to it. Okay, this page is fantastic though. I love it. I love the layout of the page. I like that you're using this like kind of electric, musical, sonic energy to create panels and to show off the band members here playing. All the drawing is really good. Drawing people playing instruments is a really tough thing to do. Um, I've done it a few times and it's hard. It's hard to not make them stiff, but still make it look accurate. The guitar playing looks fantastic. I really love this face. I like where you're dropping lines. This is a smart choice. The top of the nose is a good spot to drop the holding line because it creates the illusion that the light source is creating a highlight there. So you're getting like this like rim lighting effect without having to actually do any gray washing or anything. And that's a great spot to drop a line. Really, really nice drawing here. I like the kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 Scott Pilgrim kind of thing going on here. Creates a build of tension, about to start rocking some music. Nice texture stuff here. Again, I mentioned the leggings above, but yeah, using hatching to create the texture, but not everywhere. It's a smart choice because then you're getting a variation of different textures. I think there could be maybe a little bit more thought into the texture in the back here. You're doing these like kind of these lines like this. You could have brought in maybe some of the dry brushing that you're doing up on opening page, but overall, fantastic page. Moving on. I like that you are doing the establishing shot of the entire band here. So what you did here is you have them come out, you have them these kind of big action shots, and then you do establish the setting, which is really important. The setting needs to be established in storytelling at some point, always, whether, the traditional conventional form of storytelling is like establishing shot, move in, establish the shot tighter, the immediate setting, establish the objects in the environment, move tighter, establish the characters, their relation to each other, move tighter. Then you get into the mid shots and the emotion of the characters, and we know where they are in relation to each other. But you can kind of flip that on its head. Something that I like to do as well is like start in on the figure and then move out and establish from there. So what you're doing is like kind of establishing the emotion and the energy of the scene before you establish where the figures are on the stage in relation to each other, which is another thing to do. It's smart and it seems intentional, and I just keep that up. Keep making sure that you are establishing emotion, character, and make sure that you're establishing the environment and the characters' spatial relation to each other, because then it makes all the storytelling and their interaction makes more sense when their spatial relation to each other is established. And this is really nice. Love this drawing. There's a looseness to the inking here that you don't have in this, but I think it's really working because you're getting like this intense motion of the singing that this character is doing and the movement that they're having while they sing. Nice lettering kind of going over top of the character, and I like the shape of this speech bubble. I think that's like a smart, intentional thing. You didn't just draw a big bubble here. You've got this kind of electric motion to it in the same way that you've drawn the lines for the electric energy and sound coming out of the guitar. You're using that same technique on the bubble. Really smart stuff. Big thumbs up there. Good hands. Hands drawing a microphone are tough. This one's a little, I could be fussy and say this hand could use a redraw, but it's not bad. Everything else on the page is really working, so I'm not really staying on it a lot. My eye isn't really led to it, so it's something that I could glance over and not notice. Because I'm looking at this with a very critical eye, I'm able to say, hey, you could draw this hand a little bit better. I know you can because I've seen everything else that you've drawn on this book. But the hand on the guitar here is really, really, really well drawn. This hand is well drawn. So I think this hand could be a little bit better. I think probably a part of this is that the glove, um, the fingers and the glove and the relation of how the glove is working with the hand is a little off, and also the way that it's holding the mic. I think you would have benefited by just taking a reference photo of your own hand like that, drawing, holding something like the mic, and just use, whatever you have handy. Take a picture of it. You can see in the shot of me in this video recording how my right hand is bending and how it's positioned. So it's just take a quick shot and it'll help you um, give this some realism, because then you've got a reference point for how to draw that hand. This is a pretty nice environmental shot. One thing I would say, this is something that I talked about in the last video with perspective, the last portfolio, is that a lot when you're doing 2-point perspective, you kind of want one of the vanishing points to be a little bit closer to the panel border than you have it, right? So if you've got your horizon line at about eye level, which is a good idea for an establishing shot. It gives you a point of reference for everything that you're drawing on the page. Now, I think what you might have wanted to do here is have the vanishing point for this side either closer or this side either closer. I mean, that would be up to you and what's more important to you. Is it more important to the story that you see the sign that says what this place is, and you show this out front? These are pretty nice drawings of the cars too. I think these are great drawings. Cars are tough to draw. You did a really good job with those. So I might want to keep that where it is further off, and then this a little bit closer. So that could be there with the garages. and those would be shorter because the vanishing point's closer to the edge. Um, which means that, when, like I said in the last portfolio review, when the vanishing point is closer to an object, that means there's more foreshortening. So the garage doors would be smaller, and then you've got your figures there. So it's just when you actually look out into the world and you're looking at the environment of the real world and you're looking at vanishing points, one is closer to the edge of the panel, one is farther away. One of the vanishing points is generally closer to your eye line and one is much farther away. Just a good rule of thumb to think about when you're drawing. And like, you can take creative liberties, but you need to understand how things look in reality. And then when you want to distort reality, you do it with intention. And I think that this panel just, it looks a little bit forced because you wanted to show so much of both sides, and by doing so, you sacrificed a bit of realism there. Um, I mean, it's a great drawing, uh, and I can't fault the drawing in any way. The actual drawing of the shapes, the figures, you did a really good job of dropping out detail on these figures. And making them small and readable. That's a tough thing to do by not over detailing, but you've got a really good shape to them. And the cars, like I said, are drawn really nicely. I think just like keep an eye on that perspective and get that book I recommended to the last person. Again, Perspective Made Easy by Ernest Norling. I like what you've done here with the eyes. You did kind of like the dot eyes as the reaction, and then you drew the eyes in full. So there's a lot of that's some fun cartooning. I love cartooning. It's a choice that you've made here. It's intentional, and I think it's working for me stylistically. I like it. I like your art a lot. I think stylistically, it's kind of the stuff that I like to read. Um, what do I say here? Something a little bit. I think the negative space in this panel, this big black in the corner, feels like it's a little bit off balance. I'm not going to do any redraws or anything, but I think maybe if they were more centered in the door frame, my eye wouldn't be pulled away from the figures so much. Here on this page, if you're looking at where they are here, um, next to each other, and then you're moving the camera to their head, this is not what you would see. And this is really pulling me out of the panel here. I really like the drawing of these two figures. Again, you're killing it. You're in your figure drawing, and your anatomy is really strong, and your inking is choice. But this is not right. So I'm just gonna pull this over here. What you would be seeing here if you moved the camera from where it is here and where the building is. And first of all, I think what you could have done is had just the edges there of the door, and then you're framing the figures in that door, and then just have that almost all black like that. Then you've got them framed better, and it's pulling you into their conversation. So then you've got the camera moving right there, right? So if you're moving the camera there and you've got the building behind them, you wouldn't be seeing inside the door in that way. It wouldn't be this big open thing. And also, I mean, it's kind of funky looking here. What would this would look like would be I don't even think you'd see it because he's standing a good 3-4 feet out from the door, which means that the door opening, the middle of the door opening is like right there behind him. So that's the first door. You've got your perspective like right centered on these two figures. There's your second door. So you'd hardly have any door in this at all. You'd have like the edge of the building right there. And then this would be whatever the environment is that you've established in the first panel, which is like trees in the background. It looks like a field of trees. So you'd have like your field and you'd have some trees here like this. And that is a more accurate representation of the environment that you've established. So as you're drawing a comic and you're telling the story, because you have that establishing shot in the first panel, the whole point of that establishing shot is so that you can understand where these characters are in their environment, and then you immediately break the rules of the environment that you established in the first panel. So you have to be very conscious of the establishing shot and where you've set things up for this page, right? You've got your trees back here, and I think that this panel would work better anyways if this was white space and you had maybe some silhouetted trees, and then you've got your field here, and you don't have to have these random ass perspective lines right here, because that's not where your perspective is. You've got that. And then one thing that I mentioned in the last page, or the last portfolio review, is when you're doing these static side shots, it's good to put something in the foreground. So in your establishing shot, you've got a stack of wheels here. I think you could put a stack of wheels right there too. And then when you draw this page, you've got your stack of wheels in the severe foreground. And then you've got dimension, and you've got another layer of visual interest. So something to think about in the future when you're doing your environmental drawing. Okay, this page is looking really nice. Really love this panel. Great environment, great detail. The car's a little short. I think this car would be longer. But yeah, this is great. This is a really nice drawing. I love the shadow that's coming down from her hair. I like the environment in the back. I like the big door. It's nice. It's creepy. It's building tension. I really like that you've done your own hand lettering on the to-do, and that I'm not sure how you did the Quiznos card, but it looks like you maybe scanned and bitmapped a Quiznos card, or you found a screenshot online and bitmapped it, but it's really good. It's adding a lot of realism. It's adding, it's very thoughtful way of in-world storytelling. I think it's looking great. Really nice inking in this panel. Really nice inking on the car. And these line qualities are really nice. Ooh, that's a great page. So I do think this is something that happens. So I'm kind of getting that your work is digital now, because one thing that happens, I find, with artists who work digitally sometimes, is that your line here is very delicate and thin, and then you've got a thicker brush on the car, and then a thinner brush here. Now, what's happened is it looks like you've drawn a lot of this page with a single line weight. So you're not getting as much variation in the quality of line in as interesting of a way on that page. I mean, this looks like it's a pinup. So this looks like it's a different piece of work. Now that I'm looking at it, I think this ends on Hi Dad, and then leads into this pinup that you've done here. But I think that the drawing in this story is a lot stronger, and the variation of line weight is a lot stronger than in this pinup. I think this house is falling a little flat for me. Some of the perspective is a little off, and I think, this just looks like you're just drawing shapes in perspective, instead of it feeling like this is a house that exists in a world. It feels like you're drawing shapes in perspective. I think the roof of this house is falling a little flat too. Like the shingles are off. So this one, I think image could use a little bit of work, but this story is really landing for me. Here's your next one. One thing I'm noticing too is, if you look here, this is another indicator that you've drawn this digitally, which is leading to me to believe now that all of this is digital. I'm actually seeing it here a little bit now too, up on this page. So this is something you want to be careful of. You can see it around that. What's happened here is that I'm seeing it here too. Something to be conscious of now that I'm super zoomed in. I can see it, seeing it here, seeing it here. What happens when you're inking digitally is, if you use a brush that has a textured edge to it, and then you fill out, we're going to show you here. What happens is, if you're using a brush that has a textured edge, and you're drawing a shape, and then you're just using the fill tool, what happens is because of the textured edge, the fill tool creates this line and it doesn't fill properly. And that's why you're getting this here. And that's just like it's such a small thing, but it just shows a lack of care for the inking on this page because it's so clear and it's so obvious when you're looking at the page from even from a distance, you're seeing it there on the sleeve big time. So this just tells me that you didn't look close enough at the final art and you just let that go. Which is not a good thing to have in a portfolio. So, like I said, this first story is like almost a professional level, except for a few small things. I could see this published by a publisher. This image is not. So one thing that's really important in a portfolio is consistency of quality. I would take this right out of this portfolio, this drawing. I think this story is so strong and the drawing is so strong, the inking is so strong, and then you immediately follow that up with a pinup that is not of the same quality. Like this is a great drawing of this character. This face on this character and the coat, everything here is just drawn really, really well. But it seems like you just kind of fudged in the shingles and then you blocked out the house and just dropped it in. And the idea is really good. Having the figure pop out of this big black um, area in the house is a really smart, cool choice. And then you've got the windows. The problem is that you put a fraction of the love into the house of what you put into the drawing of the character. And then over here, you've just got that issue that I've showed you with the inking, where it's just like, it's very amateurish, an amateurish mistake compared to the quality that you have of the inking up here. That is like professional level inking. I would hire the John Conrad that did this short story to ink my work because I think it's that good. But I would not hire this John Conrad to ink my work. So it's just like take a look at the quality of work in your portfolio and be very critical piece to piece if it's all of the same level of quality. And I'm being hard on you here. This is a great piece. This is a really beautiful pinup with some really good drawing, but I'm being hard on it because I see so much potential in your work, and I think that you're very, very close to being able to be published at a lot of different publishers. Like Boom, I could see Boom publishing this story in a heartbeat in some of the books that it's doing, like this is great stuff. And so I want to be hard on you because I know that you can do professional level work already. You just have to push yourself a little bit harder here and be more thoughtful of what you're putting in your portfolio piece to piece. So let's move on to the next one here so that I can get the third portfolio in. Um, really nice color spotting. I love the single tone coloring that you're doing here. I also really like the font in this story. I think the font is really working. It looks like it's like the same font as you used up here, looking at it now. Um, yeah, it looks like it's the same font, I'm thinking, or it's very similar. Either way, if it's the same or not, you've been very thoughtful about the font that you've chosen, and it is collaborating with the art in a very nice way, and it's looking really good. I really like this story already. I think it's beautifully inked. Please take this pin up out of your portfolio or rework the building and some of the inking because it's like pulling down the rest of the work in it so far. Really nice work, really nice lettering on the sign as well. Good hands, good detail work here. I like that you're blocking out a lot of this jacket in black. It's really nice drawing, really nice structure to the panels, having this in the foreground, this painting, and then having the character off to the side, and the shape of their body goes like this. So it kind of pulls you back down into the page. These are really nice drawings, really nice inking here. Really delicate, but there's a lot of movement and a lot of energy. It's not stiff. Really nice stuff. This cup's a little funky. I think you could take another pass at drawing that cup. The angle of the roundness of this is not matching. Like the roundness of the lid is not matching the roundness of the very bottom of the cup. You see that the bottom of that and that, like, I don't know. I think you can take another pass on the drawing of that cup, but otherwise this page is beautiful. I like what you've done here with this lighting. That's really cool. This like kind of lens flare that you're catching off the corner. Um, yeah, even something invisible is a spectacle in the right light. I think that's a really great line of text to go with that panel. It's really cool. One thing that I would say though, this wall, like I mentioned before in when I was talking about 2-point perspective, when you've got the vanishing point close to the edge of the panel, that means that the length or the width of the items that are in this like kind of forced perspective will be a little bit shorter. So that's just something to think about. Okay, on to another story. Okay, this one's fully colored. Nice, solid coloring here. Um, nice choices to use the flat red in the foreground and then the yellow in the background with a purple color hold on the figure. Really nice drawing of the face here too. This is great character work. Um, He's got a cool hair and good. I like the shadows under the eyes. You're doing a lot of storytelling and world building just in the way this character's face looks. They're tired. They're beaten up. They've cut their thumb off pretty much without noticing. There's a bit of muddiness in the color of this roof. This is a little nitpicky for me, like, but I think it's like a little bit muddy compared to how like nice and vibrant a lot of the other colors are. So I think you could have taken this kind of like beige and then pushed like just done like maybe a mauve or like something a little bit closer like that. That dark kind of purpley like grayed out purple could have been used on that roof, and then you could have used that pink there on that roof just to add a little bit more color instead of graying it out as much as you have. But the colors are solid though. You're doing a good job in separating the values of these two characters here, and you're doing a good job in adding like a little bit of purple to the foreground character here, which is pushing them into the foreground. Again, really nice drawing here. I like this, like the trapped behind the eyes. Very cool. Um, Creepy, nice storytelling. The perspective's working good here and here. Perspective's good here. The one thing is like there's like this weird empty space in this hall that I noticed in this panel as well. This big open room, like this hall feels a little bit like less lived in, and it feels like this is a huge house. So because I don't have like an establishing of the house, um, I think there's something just like a little bit. I don't know what it is, but I think it's that the rest of the kitchen is working so well. Um, I'm wondering if this is a 3D model that you've based this on, because I find with when you use 3D models as a reference point, a lot of times what happens is like there's just these like blocks of shapes. It doesn't really feel like an actual house out here. It just feels like blocks of shapes drawn in perspective. So it's just something to think about. Again, think of the environment as a character. You've done a great job in the kitchen with the light and the flowers, the bowl on the table. Like these details are great. All the details here that are behind him on the kitchen counter, like the mixer and the microwave and these things, all these things add so much life to this environment. And then you've just got this kind of like, I don't know, this is like basic shapes in here that don't feel as lived in as this. I think like I don't even know if you needed to have this big open door here. You could have just had her walking through a smaller door and maybe played up more of the details of the kitchen. But because I don't have the full story here, I'm not sure if this is an intentional part of the storytelling. But all of that said, this is something that you need to think about, is that all the spaces of your environment, if you're going to draw them, make them lived in or don't draw them at all. I love the yellow and the purple here, though. This panel, the coloring on this panel is so sick. I almost wish that, and same with this panel here, I almost wish that the rest of the story had this kind of like wild saturation. Um, because like there is some muddiness to the rest, which though it does like the contrast and muddiness to high saturation does make these panels stand out. but I do think like these are some of the more successful panels that you've colored. I think these ones are working really well too with the blue and the purple. So I got a half hour for this one, so that worked really well. So yeah, here's what I have to say about your work. I think you could be doing professional work right now. I think you need to push yourself a little harder in some of the aspects of your work. I think like keep making sure that your environments feel lived in. Keep making sure that you're drawing your perspective accurately and your figures in perspective accurately. Your figure work is really good, spot on. Your inking is really beautiful in all of the stories except maybe this pinup. The inking is delicate and intentional. You're mixing up your line weights. Really, really strong inking, really strong figure work, great, clear, crisp storytelling, really solid lettering too. Like this, the lettering's fantastic on these. I don't know if I don't think it mentioned whether you did the lettering yourself, but it says by John Conrad. So I have to assume that you did your own lettering on this. And you did a fantastic job with the lettering, really great job with the bubbles and the font choices. I like where you're spotting the black here. You're doing a great job with foreground, middle ground, background. Um, and the coloring's great too. So seriously, fantastic work, John. Work on a few of the things that I mentioned. Be more intentional and push yourself. Don't become complacent with your work right now because it is at a good level, but you're at a risk of the level that you're at is a level that I find a lot of people get to and then stop getting better. So one thing that you want to do right now is not become complacent. Keep pushing yourself to get better. Keep pushing yourself to draw more accurate perspective, more accurate figure in perspective. Keep pushing yourself to think of the environment as a character, especially because you're doing these real like it like it feels like you're there. These feel like real characters. They feel real lived in. You want the environment to have that same kind of love that you're giving to your characters. You want the inking and the detail of the environment to have the same kind of love that you're giving to your characters. So just really focus on the stuff that I mentioned and like you're there. Keep up the great work. Keep working on getting better. And I think you've got a future ahead of you. So thank you, John, for submitting your portfolio. And like I said to the last person, it takes a lot of guts to put yourself out there, and you should be proud of yourself for doing so. Okay, so now I'm going to pull up our next portfolio here. I just have to grab it from the link. Okay, so another John, it looks like. This one is from Chico. Okay, this one is from Chico. Don't know if Chico is in the chat. Yes. He, him, they. Okay, perfect. Hello, Chico. Thank you for joining the portfolio reviews. I'm gonna try and give this one about a half hour, and then I think we'll be set for the panel. Saloon Mermaids, Wet Frontier. Love it. Okay. Some nice coloring. There's a bit of an animated look to it. Nice shaping though, like there's not any lines on this element here. It's just shapes, colored shapes, and it's looking kind of cool. I'm gonna go through this whole story first, I think, before I start critiquing panel to panel here. Ooh, really nice painting on this stuff. So there's a bit of an animated look to the way that you're doing your art for your comics here, and that you've got lines on your characters. You've got black lines on your characters, but you don't have them on any of the backgrounds, which is a cool look. I like that you've made that choice. It gives it the effect of looking like an animated cartoon. And you're great at painting as well for your backgrounds. I like that drawing. That's a nice drawing of the face. Okay, so let's get started on Saloon Mermaids, Wet Frontier. Um, so the cover, I like that you've done a bit of color holding on this. Like this color seems like it's not fully black. Like it's almost more of like a brown, like an off black, which I think is looking really nice there. I actually wish you had done that more on the story here. So that's just like a technique thing, but I think that that's a nice thing to do is to add a color hold to your lines so that it gives it like a nice visual flair. Um, Introducing your characters. I do find like I feel like the cover doesn't actually do the quality of your art justice, to be honest with you. I think like some of the strongest stuff that you have in your story is some of this painting, some of this background painting. It's like the painting of the ship here and the lighting, like that's some of the stronger stuff. And the characters are great, and you want to see the characters. But and I know why you did this. You wanted to do like the saloon poster up on a board, but like conceptually, I get it. But I think you're playing against your strengths. I don't think the strength of your art comes from the graphic quality of it, which is what this cover is doing. I think a lot of the strength in your work comes in the way that you're mixing like these painted backgrounds with the more line cell shaded figures. So I think you kind of wanted to do a cover for this that plays up that quality of your work and plays to your strengths as an artist. Again, this is my opinion, but I've been doing this a long time, and you always, as an artist, want to play to your strengths, especially when this is the first thing that someone's going to be seeing when they look at your portfolio. Play to your strengths. This could be like one of your beautifully painted backgrounds with your three main figures here over top of that background, and then you're seeing what the tone of the story is going to be like on the inside. Um, yeah. So that would be my advice generally for that cover. Um, yeah, I like this first page a lot. I think it's fun that you're like I said, you're doing these digital paintings. I think that the if you're gonna be using black for your holding lines on your figures and doing that cell shading, I don't think you really want to have anything that's full black in the background, really. So you might have wanted to do these boats and maybe like more of a blue, or something that stands out. But again, I mentioned this in the last portfolio. You kind of want to watch those values. Um, I'm curious to like drop this in here. I feel like the value of the purple water is like a little bit dark. I think you could push that back for more to a mid value to make the other details on the page pop. I think it's a little bit dark, and I'm curious to see how much K is in it. So there's 35K, which is when you're doing something for print, you want to look at your work in CMYK because printers print to those values usually. Um, and so what you want to do is make sure that there's not too much K, which you can see here. I'm looking at it with the eyedropper tool in Photoshop, that there's not too much K in the color, because what will happen if there's too much K is that it will print really muddy and really dark. So you can see here at the bottom of where this gradient is in the background, there's 66K, which means that's going to print really, really dark because K means black. I don't know why. Maybe because K is the last letter of black, probably. Yeah, I think we figured it out, everybody. Um, K, you don't want to have, like, as a rule of thumb, I was told early in my career by a very well-respected colorist that you didn't want to have more than 30K anywhere on the page that isn't your line work, that isn't your darkest black. So having 70K at the bottom of this gradient is a lot. That's going to print very, very dark. Now, all of that said, this might be something that is not intended for print. This could be something that is made to be a digital comic. But that said, also, you never know when you might want to print this out as a zine, as a pamphlet, to use to hand out to people as a portfolio. So I generally, even if I am doing something that's just going to be a web comic or going to be seen digitally, I want to make sure that it could print well just in case. And so it's a good rule of thumb to make sure that the K value is under 30. I personally like it to be under 20 because I use a lot of black in my work. I have a lot of spaces of black and I've got a lot of spot blacks, and a lot of figures are silhouetted. So, you could lose any of that at any moment. If there's too much black printed in the color, you could lose the edges of the shapes that you've worked so hard, lose the edges of the figure. Um, yeah, someone said in the chat, I've done a lot of dark values, and I generally regard anything in the lower fourth of the color picker as well, may as well be black. So the lower fourth would be like down there, right? So look, if you're going up here, look, it doesn't even get to 30 until about there, which is probably like a third of the color picker is cut off. When I'm coloring, I don't do any K above like 20. I try to, because I just find it's just gonna look really dark on the page when it's printed. You just don't know what to expect. And like, printers are inconsistent. Some printers may print really light, some dark, and a lot of times you don't get proof copies when you're doing a book in print. So I always play it safe and keep my colors below a level of 20K. So that's just something to think about when you're coloring, and you're coloring all of your own work. And they're beautiful colors. So, just a little bit of thought put into how these things print, it would be beneficial to you. One of the things I noticed that I would mention is that I think that the bubbles are a little thin. You know what? I kind of almost think that the way that your art is, you could drop the line from the outside of your bubbles completely and just have like white bubbles. I think that would look cool with your work, and then that would make it so that the only black on your page is the holding lines for your characters, and the black for the lettering here. For the lettering, so serifed fonts for dialogue is kind of a no-no. You can do it, and I know that it's intentional to the vibe of the story that you're doing here, but I think that you might want to find a font that is a little bit more readable. Like, readability is the prime importance in lettering, is of prime importance. That's the thing you should be thinking about most. The serif font looks good for your caption here. The serif font looks good in the uh in the caption, in the bubbles here, but on the paper, like texture, like I think it's working there. But for the dialogue, I think you might want to try and find the Blambot font. You probably want something a little bit less blocky, and then again, look at the spacing from line to line. It should be tighter, like comic fonts, because the real estate of the page is so important. That's why I think you want the space between your lines to be a lot tighter, so that they're not necessarily touching each other, but you want to almost, like I said, push the limit. So if this is like a 7 font, try an 8 for the line spacing. I think that you've got a little bit too much space around the lettering, so that the bubbles could be a little tighter, and then you could have a bit of a clearer font. But like, where you've got the fonts, or where you've got the dialogue bubbles, is a good spot. I like the font that you've used for the SFX here. And one thing I was going to mention too that I noticed is I actually really like the big black spotting that you've done on this character in the beginning. And I was hoping to see more of the big black spotting against the more painterly backgrounds, but you kind of dropped it off after that. I know it's probably story dependent, and that this is the bad character, the bad guy, but like it looks really nice. I think the black spotting, the big black shapes against the more painterly stuff is really working. So you should be pushing that a little bit more in the other pages. This background is great. I think it's really fun. Um, I think I think that on your figures, you might want to play a little bit more with the line weights. Like you're doing it a little bit here. Um, the rim lighting on this, it'll just push it out a little bit from the background a little bit more. Like you can see, I think there's like a bit of inconsistency in the line weights between the exterior of the panels and then the line weight of the bubble and then the line weight on your character. Like I think everything should feel more in unison. So I think like see how you've got this like nice thick to thin thing going on the line weight around the panel here. I think you could be doing a little bit of that on your figures and playing that up a little bit more. Um, One thing I'd say here is that you've got this like blue rim light, but a yellow light source. So just, I mean, like it's not like it looks bad or anything. I like the blue rim light, but then you might want to have more blue lighting, right? Just something to be conscious of. But the rim lighting I thought looked nice, and then you completely dropped it here. I'm not saying you need to do rim lighting on every panel, but it makes for a dynamic figure drawing. So you might want to be rim lighting this character again and adding like one light source because I think when you're looking for that animated style, generally like you're referencing back to a lot of cartoons. Um, and you'll usually see at one light source on a figure. So if we look at something like a still from like a Studio Ghibli movie, let's look at Nausicaa still frame. So here's a still frame from Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Fantastic movie. Can never go wrong with Hayao Miyazaki. So what you'll see in animated films a lot is the figures have a black line around them, and then elements that are in movement that are being animated will have the black line around them, and then the backgrounds and stuff that's not in movement will be painted. So I think like with your work here, what you could be doing, and another thing, look at the line weight here. So we've got the line weight thicker here, kind of where the shadows are being dropped from the light. So you might want to think about where the lighting is. Do a little bit of a thicker line. If this character is being lit from over here, you could do a little bit of a thicker line here, a little bit of a thicker line where things overlap, and just think a little bit more about the line weights. And you see on Nausicaa here, she's got just like a soft cut, maybe just like one cut on all of your figures would give it like just a little bit more of a professional sheen. Um, I think you're doing really cool things style-wise, though. I think it's an interesting look. I think that you can just refine it a little bit more, and that'll add a bit of professionalism to it. Really great cartooning in the faces, though. That was one of the things that I noticed. I liked your faces. There's some fun cartooning going on there. But yeah, I think this is something to like keep an eye on. Like, go watch a bunch of Ghibli movies. I'm sure that you're a fan of animation, judging by your work already. Um, This is a really nice panel, really nice painting here. I gotta zoom back in because I feel like I zoomed out too much here. So this is a double page spread, I'm guessing, because the size of this and then the size is the size of that. So this is probably meant to be looked at as a double page spread. I like a double page spread that like I'm kind of in a minority where I'm like I'm always very hesitant to draw double page spreads because in print what happens a lot of the time is that when you're opening and closing a trade paperback, you lose a lot more in the center of the page that you're expecting. So for me, the way to make a double page spread work is to be thoughtful of where the center of the pages is right here, right? And you've done a good job of keeping things kind of out of that page center so that because you're going to lose like an inch. You lose way more than you think in any kind of trade collection or any kind of thicker collection of work. So you want to make sure at the center of that page you're getting as much out of that center as possible, and that you do want to have a big panel overlap the center so that it's very clear when you open that page that it is a double page spread, and the layout of this page is a smart way to do a double page spread where you've got a big panel that goes across almost the whole page, but then you've got your three panels that you can read vertically as soon as you get there. So another good way to do a double page spread where you've got the big panels, have the big panel go all the way across horizontally, and then you've got a few small panels that go across the bottom. But yeah, this is a great layout for a double page spread. Really nice painting on the back. I think you're doing a good job. And again, in values, you've got your lights, your mids, your darks. This window is the light, and and then you've got your darks in the back. You've actually got a bit of a thicker holding line on this one, which is doing a nice job of pushing the figure forward. Um, I would say one thing I would say is like watch the gradients. You've got a lot of these gradients, and they can look a little bit chalky if you're not careful. Um, Color gradients are a tough thing to manage. I actually use a lot of gradients in my work, but I use them in Dissolve, which makes them look a little bit broken apart. There's a texture to them, so that they're not just like this real digital looking chalky gradient. So I would just like keep an eye on those gradients here in these side panels because they're looking a little bit chalky. You might want to just use a different color in the back and maybe block out one or two shapes. Like one thing to think about is when you're drawing your environments, you almost can think about your environment like as if it's a stage play. So in a panel like this, you could just have like this character's right, just a little bit of the detail of the wood just for the impression, the illusion of environment. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just a little bit of something to keep them grounded in the reality that you're establishing in this panel. But really nice painting. I think it's great. I like the color palettes that you've chosen. I feel like I'm underwater. Um, yep. And then we'll zoom back out. Again, same note on this figure as I had on the figure above. I think you could be mixing and matching line weights a little bit. And I do think that you could use like one cut on your figures that would add just a little bit of depth to them, and it would help form the shape of their body and their clothes, and it would give them some dimension, and it would just like push them a little bit strong in a more stronger way. Um, you did a good job with the lettering. You're establishing the reading order in a good way in terms of this bubble to this bubble, this bubble, this bubble. You might want to have that bubble kind of go in between, so you're just reading along the top, but generally I think the reading order is pretty clear here. Again, in this panel, I think you're dropping out a little bit one too many backgrounds on this page. I think here's an opportunity for you to block out a few things that are part of the environment. Like this is great here. This the wheel, the ship wheel that you've got up here, and the door frame. Like you could just have the ship wheel kind of here and the door frame and then another value here. Just something, just to add in. This is a fantastic face. I noticed this when I first went through. I think the cartooning here is really, really fun. The emotion is super clear. It's humorous and it's well drawn. You're like kind of nailing the vibe here. Again, this is another thing with the gradient is like a little chalky, and I think this green probably has too much K in it just for on first glance. I think that green is going to print to be pretty much black in print. This is another great panel. I love this character. I think this character is one of the better characters. Oh, I like the pink and green is interesting. Um, the pink and green with the palette is very interesting. It's a nice color combo. Oh, style change here while they're telling a story. I think it's working. I think that's fun. This is a pretty wild page in terms of how hyperactive the color changes are, but Um, it's a choice, and I think it's working. Might not be for everybody, but I think it's looking good. I really love this pink and green. I'm hoping to see more of that palette than just this page here. Um, One thing I like to do, I'll mention this too, since we're talking a lot of colors with your work. Um, One thing that's striking me is that like the figures are almost colored and with such a different, I don't know, they just feel like so pushed away from the background. There might be a way to like bring the page together a little bit. Um, Drop this in here. So what I like to do to just like kind of bring my pages together and make it feel like it's all in the same environment is like I'll do like overlays sometimes to just like, just bring everything together and make it feel like the colored light from that page is dictating the colors that you're seeing on the page. And I think, not necessarily, you don't have to do like this exact overlay or this exact technique that I'm doing, but like maybe having like a little bit of a blue tint to everything would make it really feel like it's underwater and bring the page together. One thing I was going to mention too, that I'm finding like the brown borders like a little bit muddy, where all the other colors on the page have such nice vibrance to them that the brown border is like a little muddy compared to everything else. I actually think, and this is something I mentioned to the first artist, in terms of clarity of storytelling and paneling, I think white borders, like thinner white borders, might just work for this story in a better way. Like I think all the vibrance of your color is so nice that's it's like being brought down a little bit by the muddiness of the borders. And I know conceptually, thematically, you've got the wood deck, like the ship deck wall is the border, but like I honestly just think like a white panel border with white, or like a black panel border with white gutters might work better. And I'd be curious to see, yeah, how this looks with a white panel border. Hold on one sec here. We're gonna rasterize. Oops. My gosh. Okay, hold on. What do let's see if we can just do this. Okay.
It just wants to say hi to you really quick.
Okay. My 2-year-old son wants to say hi really quick. Hi, buddy. I am doing some work. Hi, honey. I know. Do you want to say hi? There's some people watching. I like your hat. You look cute. See, look, I'm just looking at somebody's drawing. Isn't it really nice, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice. Isn't that a fun character?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Okay, but I have to work and I have to talk about this artwork, okay? So I'll talk to you. I'll hang out with you in a few minutes, okay, honey? You gotta go see mommy for a sec. And then we can draw, okay? We'll draw together in a second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. He just woke up from his nap. He wanted to say hi to his dad, and I can't say no to that cute, beautiful little face. Okay. Um, I think this is working better with the white border. I'm looking at it like this, and I actually think that the craggy edges are working well with the white border as well. So I don't think you need to change anything about the shapes of the paneling, but I think that the white is like really bringing out the beautiful coloring that you're doing. And the brown is like muddying everything up a little bit. So my recommendation and my personal preference on this would be go white borders like I have it here. I think it's just like everything is popping more with the white border, and it's bringing out the figure and it's making it jump out at the reader. Um, so I would say, yeah, maybe go back to to a white border for this story. Um, So this border is not, so this lighter border, the pink one here is pretty nice. What I think it is that this panel border is a little too dark. And then the lighter panel border is letting everything kind of stand out a little bit more. This is a nice painting. Again, I love the painting in this. The background painting is really nice. You're a quality painter. This is a good pose. There's a lot of dynamism in the anatomy of the characters, and there's a lot of nice movement. One thing that you're doing really well here is leading the eye, and this is something that I talked about uh, in a lot of the things, but you're doing it really well throughout the story so far, is that you've got this character is pointing up to the top panel, this character is leading you down here, and then this character's movement is leading you back across the page and then down and across and then off the end. And that's exactly what you want to be doing when you're thinking about the way that you lead the eye. You want to look left to right, down across the page, left to right. And that's kind of like, that there's pages where you're not doing that, but generally you don't want the eye going off the page early, prematurely. You want to keep the eye moving through the page and then lead off the page at the end. And this is like the perfect Z structure of leading the eye, where you go left to right, across the page, left to right. So just good job with that here. And good job with the motion of the figure. It's great cartooning. I think it's so fun. I like this character too. I know it's not tonally exactly the same, but my son, who you just met, has been watching a lot of SpongeBob, so I'm catching like a little bit of SpongeBob vibes with the locations underwater here. This is a little gray for this building. Everything is so vibrant and saturated. I think like you should be pushing away from grays and just using other colors. The backgrounds on this panel feel a little sparse. I think you could be doing more of these like stone things in the back. And I also think that color pops really nicely against the green. Like your color palette choices are really nice. So I think I can see you've got a little bit way faded out here, but I just think a little bit more something in the background here would benefit everything else. Oh, great face on that character there. Great. Okay. So yeah, my biggest notes here are just like kind of refining this style a little bit more. I think you've got a great start to what you're doing, and um I think there's some great influences happening here. Um and I just think it could be refined a little bit more stylistically. I think maybe one cut on some of the more bigger prominent figures would go a long way to making the shape of them really clear. I think playing a little bit more with the line weights. I would make the panel gutters white and get a more comic focused font for readability. I would drop the borders on the balloons and keep an eye on the balloon shapes. Also, I would say this for anybody getting into comic book lettering or lettering themselves, this book is a very good resource. I know I talked about Blambot earlier, but Nate Picos is incredible. As you can see, I have read this a lot, and I've only lettered a few of my things, and it's called The Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering. You read through this, you'll know everything you need to know ever about comic book lettering and SFX, and all the basics are in here, but there's also some more intermediate information as well. Nate is a fantastic guy. He lettered me on Black Hammer Justice League that I did with Jeff Lemire. He did incredible work on it. Great letterer, great guy. Support him. This is his own book that he did published through Image. So all sales of this would go directly to Nate. Go support Nate. Go get Blambot fonts, and your art will look better for it. But yeah, I think you've got a great start here, and you're doing something interesting and different. I don't see a lot of style like this. The funny thing about it is that I know a lot of people are familiar with Fiona Staples's artwork on Saga, but I don't think they realize that she's using a lot of the similar techniques to what you're doing here, and that she is outlining her characters in black and then she is painting without any kind of holding lines the background into the page. And so stylistically, she's doing a lot of similar things to you. Obviously, the work does not look like your work, but you can see here. This would be something to take a look at and maybe just take a few notes on. She's got a soft cut on her characters, one soft cut. She's got the outline in black, and then she's got her backgrounds completely painted. So this is like a style similar to yours in terms of ideas that is by one of the biggest artists in comics. And you can see what plain white borders. There's no fuss, no muss with the storytelling. It's very clear. It's very tight. It's very precise. And that's what you want to do all the time whenever you're telling a comic. Like, just make sure it's all very clear. But yeah, you might want to just take a look at Fiona Staples' work on Saga and the way that she's adapted some of the ideas behind storytelling in animated film and television into how that can work on the page of a comic book. But yeah, great work, Chico. I think you've got a really good start here, and you're doing something really different, which which I really respect and admire. And I think that's all the time I have today for portfolio reviews. But again, I want to just say, Chico, I really admire you for putting your work out there. It's a terrifying thing to do, and it takes a lot of guts and a lot of bravery to have a lot of people that you don't know looking at your work and critiquing it and pointing out perceived flaws and failures, but also like you've done a lot of really incredible things here and you're taking some big swings, and I appreciate that. And I think that and I think you just keep pushing and making amazing artwork. Um, Thank you to everyone who submitted work. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope that anybody listening who didn't submit work, took something home from this and was able to learn and make their own work better. Comics is an intense amount of work, so there's a lot of love that needs to get put into it and a lot of work to get to the level of being published. So everybody just keep working at it. Keep your nose to the grindstone and keep drawing. Have a
All
good
right.
day.
Thank you so much, Michael. Our next panel is at 4 p.m. EST, tabling at Conventions for Beginners with Kelsey D. Crawford. Thank you all for attending.